All right, good afternoon, eighth graders. So, our first lesson, we're talking about partial forms of a number. So, this is dealing with there being a whole, and you have to identify your whole, whatever it is, your entire class, and being able to represent if there's a situation where not everybody is included. So, for instance, the portion of the class that are girls. You would represent that using a partial form of a number. We have our 5 types. First type, fractions, then decimals, ratios, percents, and then a visual form. Um, we're using these 5 types because there's many different forms that you could use, and it's helpful to know the types that they are and how they kind of interact with each other and the properties of each one. So we're going to go through all 5 of these, talk about them. This will be mostly review, but it's a good kind of pull together of a bunch of different ideas. All right, our first type, a fraction. Okay, just as a reminder, when you deal with a fraction, you're always dealing with 2 different things. You're going to have your top of the fraction, and we're going to call that the numerator. And then the bottom of the fraction, which is called the denominator. Okay, so when we're dealing with the fraction, the denominator is telling us how much the whole is split into. So for instance, if I represent a whole as a circle, and I split it into 3 parts, the fraction that represents this is going to have the denominator of 3 because it's in 3 parts. Now say I shade in one of these parts. The shaded in portion is considered 1 out of 3. So 1/3, or 1 section of a whole that's split into 3 parts. Now say I wanted to represent the portion that isn't filled in, that's going to be 2/3, because 2 of the 3rd sections are not filled in. Now we can also have something where you have more pieces than there are in a whole. For instance, we have 2 wholes here. We split them into half, and let's say 3 of them are shaded in. Like I just said, the denominator always represents how many pieces your holes are broken into. So our holes are broken into 2 pieces each, and there are 3 pieces that are shaded in. Now we would say 1/2. Here, why don't I'm going to move this over here to make this less confusing. So this represents what's shaded in. So what's shaded in are 3 of the halves, and what are not shaded in are 1 of the halves. So that's how fractions work. Now when we're dealing with decimals, decimals are kind of considered like a fraction. However, they always are having the denominator of 10. So for instance, if I'm dealing with 0.3, that's going to be considered 3 out of 10, always. If there's 4 there, it's 4 out of 10. If there's 5 there, it's 5 out of 10. That's why whenever you move things to the right from the decimal, like this, it's considered actually smaller, because this is representing 3 out of 100. So the idea is 1 spot to the right is the 10th spot, 2 spots to the right is the thousandths. As you continue on, you're adding on the zeros. You could go out really far, and that's a very small portion of the whole. So if I want to do the same thing here, I could draw a circle and split it into 10 parts. I'm not going to do that because that's really hard to do on this board, but I would split this into 10 parts and then shade in 3 of them. And that represents the same thing. All right, go and turn over the page. Our next form is a ratio. Now, a ratio doesn't have to deal with a whole. It could. For instance, like in your class, I believe there's 14 of you, and 9 of you are girls. So we could say 9 to 5. So that would be 9 girls to 5 boys. So that's like a part to a part. However, you also could have the part to the whole. You could say 9 girls to a total of, say, 16 people. That's counting Mr. Kinney and me. So 9 to 16 would be a part compared to the total, or to the whole. This is different than any of the other forms, really, except for maybe visual. You could probably represent part to part and visual, but definitely percents, fractions, and decimals are always dealing with the part to whole, whereas with ratios you can do part to part. Now we have another type of form. So you also could do 9, and you have your colon, and then you 5. And also, ratios can also be represented as a fraction. That's another form as well. Okay. Percents. Percents tie in with ratios and really well with decimals too, actually, because you're always dealing with a ratio with a denominator of 100. So if I'll go back up to my example of 9 to 5. Well, let's not use that because that's part to part. Let's say I go out and shoot 5 baskets. So that's my total. And I make 4 of them. A pretty good shot. So the way we would represent this as a percent is we would want to get to a denominator of 100. You should remember this from last year. So I want the 100 denominator. I notice I'm multiplying by 20 here. So I'll multiply 20 in the top, left to right. 80 out of 100, this becomes 80%. And usually we're dealing with 0 through 100. So 0% is the lowest, to 100% is like everything. But you could represent something that's over 100%. You could say the amount of money I had today is 200% of what I had yesterday, which would mean it like doubled because I have the 100% and another 100% to get 200%. So, but 0 to 100% is a good kind of gauge to remember. It'll help you kind of make sense of percents a little bit more. The reason fractions are nice is because if you notice, 100 here ties in well with, say, the 100th spot. So this means 12 out of 100 because our furthest right digit is in the 100th spot. So 12 hundredths is the same thing as 12% because percent means out of 100. And the other one is visual, which can kind of get fun. There's so many options with this, which is nice. Let's say I was talking about my example over here of going out and shooting 5 baskets. So I can draw myself 5 times. And then a basket, right? And the basketball going in once. And then I'm just going to replicate this because I have a nice little tricky board. So let's see, clone. So here we go. We got it another time. It's not doing what I want. Okay, let's try this again. All right. Okay, well, instead of doing that, I'm just going to draw circles. All right, so I'm going to draw 5 circles. And I'm going to fill in 4 of them because I made 4 of them. And I'll leave blank the 5th one. This is nice because you can like see it. You can kind of see, oh, there's more filled in than not. Whereas maybe a fraction to you, or percent or decimal or ratio is a little harder to kind of see it and to know, does it mean most of it or not a lot of it. Another sort is you can have, like I was doing before, like a circle, and you can split it up into, like, say, fourths, and then I can fill in like one of them. So 1/4. So some of it, not most of it, but some of it. That's how you could describe that. So we have our 5 forms. Again, they go fraction, decimal, ratio, percents, visuals. Try to think of some examples for each one. We're going to want you to go from seeing like a percent and then making some sort of story from it. So you could say 80%, and I went to the store and I had $20 and I spent 80% of those $20, which would be $16. You should be able to go from a percent or a decimal or any of these and make a story from it, as well as the other way. All right, that's it. See you tomorrow.